Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside, I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. Silicon Manor, 1950s California, the most elegant stage in the valley, crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing. Tech billionaire Elias Thorne is about to unveil the invention that will change the world. Then, one poisoned glass later, he is dead. Police call it suicide. A neat typed note, a broken man. But Hercule Poirot sees something else entirely. A perfectly rehearsed performance. Masks of grief, loyalty, my genius, all hiding one cold, calculated killer. In this glittering theater of wealth and secrets, everyone is playing a role. Everyone has a line to deliver, and one of them has already forgotten their mask. The curtain rises, the drama begins. Who poisoned the champagne? Chapter 1. The stage is set. The sprawling Silicon Manor in 1950s. California was the perfect stage for tragedy. Art Deco elegance everywhere. Gleaming chrome railings, geometric patterns in black and gold, crystal chandeliers catching every flicker of light. Guests in silk evening gowns and crisp tuxedos moved through the rooms like actors who knew their marks. Then Elias Thorne, the billionaire who turned silicon into fortune, was found dead in his private study. Glass of poisoned champagne frozen in his stiff fingers, eyes wide open, as if still watching his empire. The police arrived quickly. They saw suicide. A typed note on the desk confessed financial ruin and failing health. Case closed. But Hercule Poirot, who had been invited as a guest of honor, saw something entirely different. A carefully directed performance. Someone in this glittering cast was playing the innocent while holding the murderer's script. The curtain rises. Sound effect. Champagne cork popping, followed by a single low piano note decaying into silence. The evening air carried expensive perfume, Chanel number 5, and the rich smoke of Cuban cigars drifting from the terrace. Inside, hothouse roses and lilies stood in tall vases, their scent mixing with furniture wax that made the polished mahogany tables shine like mirrors. The drawing room was warm from the crackling fire, yet a chill night breeze slipped through the open French doors, a brushing against cold marble floors. Poirot stood near the grand piano, small and precise in his immaculate evening clothes. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, green eyes scanning the room. Elias Thorne had been the evening star, tall, charismatic, announcing his latest silicon breakthrough that would change the world forever. Guests had applauded politely. Champagne had flowed. Corks popped like distant gunfire. Then the scream. Amelia Thorne, the strikingly beautiful wife, discovered him. Her silk gown rustled as she ran into the study, heels clicking on parquet. Elias! Mon Dieu! Elias! The cry carried perfectly, almost theatrical. Guests poured in behind her. Footsteps overlapped. A grandfather clock in the hall chimed 11, calm and indifferent. Poirot arrived last, moving with deliberate steps. He made an expressive gesture with his small, neat hands. The performance has begun earlier than anticipated, he murmured. He surveyed the scene. The study smelled faintly of bitter champagne and the sharp tang of the poison. Velvet curtains framed the French windows. Beyond them, rain began tapping the glass like impatient fingers. The desk lamp cast dramatic shadows across Thorne's face. The suicide note lay perfectly centered, too perfectly. "Observe, mon ami," Poirot said softly, though no one stood close enough to hear. "This note is typed. The signature is neat. A man in despair does not type his farewell so cleanly. Truth stumbles. Lies flow smooth." The inspector, Harlan, a large man with a tired face, declared it suicide within minutes. "Note explains everything. Business troubles, health failing, a classic case." Poirot adjusted an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "Mais non, this is murder, directed with care." He turned to the assembled cast. Amelia Thorne stood nearest the body, crisp linen handkerchief pressed to dry eyes. Her shoulders shook in perfect rhythm. 3 shakes, pause, 3 shakes. Rehearsed. Her mascara had not run. Reginald Black, Thorne's business partner, puffed a cigar in the doorway. Rough tweed jacket among silk and satin. His face showed concern, but his hands were steady. Dr. Lydia Hart, the brilliant rival inventor, held a crystal glass of champagne she had not yet sipped. Sandalwood cologne clung to her. Her expression was calm, too calm. Marcus Reed, the young private secretary, twisted soft kid gloves in his fingers, pale, sweating slightly despite the cool room. Oliver Thorne, the nephew, it paced near the cold marble fireplace. He looked devastated, eyes wide, mouth open, but no tears. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "You watch with Poirot, non? You see how each one plays their role." He stepped closer to Amelia. "The performance of grief. She weeps, yes. The handkerchief dabs. Shoulders tremble appropriately." He paused. "But observe. The handkerchief remains dry, mascara intact. The performance is technically perfect. Too perfect." He turned slightly toward the listener in his mind. "Ask yourself, why does the grieving widow avoid looking at her nephew? Why does the business partner light another cigar so calmly? Why does the rival scientist hold her glass without drinking, as if she already knows the champagne is dangerous?" The room grew quieter. Rain drummed harder. The fire crackled. Crystal chandelier tinkled overhead like nervous laughter. Poirot arranged 2 pens on the desk symmetrically. "Order and method," he whispered. "The little grey cells are awake." He addressed the group. "Mesdames et messieurs, tonight we have witnessed the first act. Elias Thorne has exited, violently. Someone among you wrote his final line. Someone among you poured the poison. Someone among you is an excellent actor." He looked directly at each face in turn. "The stage is set. The actors have taken their places." He paused, letting silence stretch. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The morning after the tragedy, Silicon Manor looked almost innocent under pale California sunlight. Art Deco symmetry still held. Black and gold geometric patterns on the walls, chrome fixtures gleaming, or velvet curtains drawn back to let light flood the breakfast room. But the perfume of last night's hothouse lilies now mixed uneasily with the strong continental coffee being poured into fine porcelain cups. The air carried a faint trace of cigar smoke that had soaked into the leather armchairs overnight. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, small and immaculate in a dark suit. He arranged 3 sugar cubes in a perfect triangle beside his cup, then tilted his egg-shaped head slightly as the cast of characters began to enter, one by one, like actors taking their marks for the second scene. First came Amelia Thorne. She wore a simple but expensive silk morning robe, the color of champagne. Her hair was pinned neatly makeup flawless, and she poured coffee for herself with hands that did not shake. Yet Poirot noticed the briefest hesitation before she lifted the cup to her lips. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "you play the role of composed hostess even now. Admirable, but perhaps a little too admirable." She gave a small practiced smile. "One must carry on, Monsieur Poirot. Elias would have expected nothing less." Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "Mais oui. And yet the eyes, they avoid contact. Interesting." Next entered Reginald Black, Thorne's senior business partner. He still wore the same rough tweed jacket from the night before, now creased. A fresh Cuban cigar already smoldered between his fingers. The smoke curled upward like a question mark. He dropped heavily into a chair and reached for the coffee pot without asking. "Terrible business," he muttered. Elias was under terrible pressure. The new silicon patents, competitors everywhere. I'm not surprised he broke. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. "You speak of pressure as if it were obvious. Yet last night you described him as triumphant. A small inconsistency, no?" Black puffed harder. The cigar tip glowed bright red. Dr. Lydia Hart arrived third, tall, angular, dressed in a crisp linen suit of pale grey. A discreet touch of sandalwood cologne followed her. She took black coffee, no sugar, and sat with perfect posture. "I respected Elias," she said, before anyone asked. "We were rivals, yes, fierce ones. But murder. Absurd." Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his neat hands. "Absurd, you say. And yet you hold the cup so tightly that your knuckles whiten. Why, Dr. Hart, does a simple cup of coffee make you defensive?" She set the cup down with deliberate care. The porcelain clicked once against the saucer. Marcus Reed, the private secretary, slipped in almost unnoticed. Soft kid gloves still on his hands, though indoors. Pale face, damp forehead. He stood rather than sat, as if ready to flee at any moment. "I was with him until 8:15, Reed volunteered quickly. "He seemed normal. Tired, but normal. Then he said he needed to make a private call." Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "A private call. To whom, one wonders. And why did you leave the study so quickly afterwards, Monsieur Reed?" Reed's gloves twisted together. I had work to finish." Finally, Oliver Thorne, the nephew, slouched through the doorway. Hair uncombed, eyes red-rimmed, but dry. And he poured himself coffee with trembling hands, splashing a little onto the crisp linen tablecloth. "He was like a father to me," Oliver said hoarsely. "This is impossible." Poirot watched the young man closely. "Grief, yes. But observe, the tremor appears only now when you speak of him. Last night, when the body was discovered, your hands were steady, curious, no?" The breakfast room fell quiet, except for the distant ticking of the grandfather clock and the soft clink of a spoon against china. Poirot stood. Though small, his presence filled the space. "Mesdames et messieurs, the players have entered. Each of you has taken the stage and spoken your opening lines. Now Poirot will ask a few simple questions. Nothing complicated, only truth." He began with Amelia, leading her to the study where the crime had occurred. The room still smelled faintly of bitter champagne and poison. Rain from the night before had left streaks on the windows. "Your last conversation with your husband, madame?" "He kissed me good night. Said he loved me. That was all." Poirot nodded slowly. "And you walked on the terrace afterwards?" "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." "Yet a glove, your glove, was found inside the study this morning." Amelia's lips parted, then closed. I Must have dropped it earlier. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The performance continues. He moved to black in the library. Shelves of leather-bound books gave off the scent of wax and old paper. The contract I found behind the fireplace, Poirot said mildly. It shows you were planning to buy out Elias's share. Quietly. Black's cigar trembled for the first time. That's months old. Nothing came of it. Yet you kept it. Hidden. Why? No answer came. On the terrace, in chill morning air, Poirot questioned Hart. You wrote a letter to Elias, threatening. If you claim my work as yours again, you will regret it. Hart lifted her chin. Anger, not intent to kill. Anger is a powerful director, Doctor. It casts long shadows. In the salon, fire crackling once more, Poirot faced Reed. Your timeline, monsieur. You say you left at 8:15, yet the housekeeper saw you near the study at 8:40. Reed swallowed. I went back for a file. And left again. Yes. Carrying nothing. Silence. Finally, in the drawing room, Poirot stood before Oliver. You inherit a great deal, do you not? I didn't want his money. I wanted him. Yet your debts are considerable. Gambling, bad investments. Oliver looked away. And that's private. Murder makes everything public, mon ami. Poirot stepped back, surveying them all. Every actor had taken their mark. Each had spoken their rehearsed lines. But in the pauses, in the glances, in the small tremblings and two steady hands, the truth waited. Who performed truth, and who performed lies? The second act had begun. Chapter 3. The first act. By late morning, the sunlight had sharpened, cutting through the tall windows of Silicon Manor and turning every chrome detail into a blade of light. The breakfast room had emptied, but the scent of strong continental coffee still hung in the air, now mixed with the faint bitterness of yesterday's champagne that seemed to have seeped into the very walls. Outside, the terrace was cold despite the sun. A thin wind carried the smell of wet roses from the garden beds. The Hercule Poirot moved alone through the study once more. He wore white kid gloves to avoid adding his own prints. With small, precise movements, he lifted papers, opened drawers, rearranged objects until everything stood symmetrical again. Order and method. Always. Beneath a stack of Parton sketches, he found something new. A single sheet torn from a notebook. In Elias Thorne's hurried handwriting were the words, L.H. knows too much. Must act before Friday. L.H. Lydia Hart. Poirot folded the note carefully and placed it in his pocket. The first real cue, he murmured. He summoned Dr. Hart to the salon. The fire had been lit again. Its crackle filled the silences. She entered wearing the same pale grey linen suit, but now a small run appeared in her stocking. A tiny imperfection that had not been there at breakfast. Dr. Hart, Poirot began pleasantly. You told me this morning that rivalry with Elias was fierce but harmless. Yet I have here a note in his hand. He feared you. Why? Hart's posture stiffened. He was paranoid lately. Too many late nights. Too much pressure. Paranoid enough to write your initials and the words, must act? She crossed to the window, looking out at the terrace. Her reflection in the glass showed lips pressed into a thin line. I wrote him a letter once, she admitted. In anger. He had filed a patent that included elements of my early work on silicon doping. I threatened legal action. That was all. Poirot tilted his head. Threats on paper can become threats in action, no? Especially when millions are at stake. Hart turned. For the first time, her calm cracked. Just a hairline fracture. I did not kill him. Yet you were seen leaving the study at 8:35. After Marcus Reed, before the private call Elias supposedly made. I went to ask about the patent. We argued. I left. That's all. Poirot stepped closer. You argued. Voices were raised. The housekeeper heard. And then, silence. Elias did not make any telephone call after that. The line was dead. Someone had disconnected it. Hart's hand rose instinctively to her throat, then dropped. Poirot continued softly. This actor plays outraged innocence. But observe the hand. It rises to protect the throat, the classic gesture of someone who feels exposed. The mask slips. Did you catch it? He paused, letting the fire's warmth contrast the chill in her eyes. Consider the psychology, Doctor. What role does a brilliant woman need to play when her life's work has been stolen? She can scream injustice, or she can smile and wait. Which did you choose? Hart said nothing. Her breathing had become shallow. Poirot turned to the others. He gathered Reginald Black in the library. The smell of old books and fresh cigar smoke was thick. The hidden contract behind the fireplace, Poirot said, producing the document. You were buying Elias out, quietly, for far less than his shares were worth. He discovered it and refused. Black's cigar trembled. Ash fell unnoticed onto the carpet. That was business, not murder. Business that would have left you in control of everything after his death. Convenient timing, no? Black looked suddenly older. The rough tweed seemed to sag on his shoulders. Next, Marcus Reed in the small morning room, and the secretary's kid gloves were gone. His bare hands showed red marks where he had twisted them. Your timeline shifts, Monsieur Reed. First 8:15 departure, then 8:40 near the study. Now you say you returned for a file. Which file? I don't remember exactly. You do not remember. Yet you are a man who remembers every appointment, every letter. Curious. Reed's eyes darted to the door. And your gloves. One was found near the champagne tray, with a trace of the same bitter residue as the poison. Reed went white. Finally, Oliver Thorne summoned to the drawing room. The nephew stood near the cold marble fireplace, arms folded tightly. You inherit the bulk, if Amelia does not remarry within 2 years. An unusual clause. Why? Uncle didn't trust her judgment with men. Or perhaps he did not trust you with money. Your gambling debts are public knowledge in certain circles. Oliver laughed, a short, bitter sound. You think I killed him for money? I loved him. Love, Poirot repeated gently. Yet your hands were steady when the body was found. No tremor, no tears. Only now, when money is mentioned, do you shake. He stepped back, regarding them all. The director method revealed itself clearly with Hart. The performance, she denies intent, voice level, posture controlled. The tell, but observe. Her eyes flick repeatedly to the exit, the body preparing flight, even while the mouth denies guilt. The psychology. I am reminded of the Orient Express affair, where a group performed collective innocence so perfectly that each small gesture seemed rehearsed. And yet one woman, one single woman, betrayed the whole through a single unguarded moment. She reached for her handbag too quickly when suspicion turned her way. Genuine shock freezes, rehearsed shock hurries. The body cannot lie forever. In that case, the little grey cells saw the pattern. Over-preparation always leaves a seam. Here, too. Dr. Hart's calm is stitched too tightly. Therefore she knows more. Perhaps not the hand that poured, but the mind that planned. You see it now, non? The theatre begins to crack. Poirot addressed the room at large. The first act is complete. A note, a threat, a glove, a disconnected phone, small pieces. But together they form the outline of a script. Someone among you wrote the ending for Elias Thorne. He made a small bow, almost theatrical. Some masks have cracked. A more will follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. The afternoon sun slanted low across Silicon Manor, turning the chrome railings into bars of molten gold and casting long dramatic shadows through the velvet-curtained windows. Inside, the drawing room felt warmer than it should, almost stifling. The fire had been fed fresh logs. It crackled steadily, sending little sparks up the chimney like misplaced applause. The lingering smell of strong coffee had given way to the sharper bite of cigar smoke and the faint, sweet rot of overblown roses wilting in their crystal vases. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand piano, small hands clasped behind his back. He had decided. It was time to press. No more gentle openings. The scripts must be tested until they tore. He began with Reginald Black in the library. The heavy leather-bound books absorbed sound, and the room felt like a sealed stage. Black sat in a deep armchair, a fresh Cuban cigar already lit. The tip glowed each time he drew breath. Poirot placed the buyout contract on the table between them, creased, slightly singed at one corner from its hiding place behind the fireplace grate. "This document," Poirot said mildly, "shows you intended to purchase Elias's controlling interest at a fraction of its value. He refused. The next day he is dead. Coincidence?" Black exhaled a long plume of smoke. "Business is ruthless, Poirot. You know that. Elias was stubborn. I was negotiating, that's all." "Negotiating," Poirot repeated. "Yet the ink is fresh, dated only 3 weeks ago. And the clause about in the event of incapacity or death is circled in red. Your hand, I think." Black's jaw tightened. The cigar trembled once, small but visible. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Rehearsed lines, Monsieur Black. Very smooth. But truth does not need rehearsal. When the body was discovered, you lit another cigar immediately. Calm, steady. Most men would drop the match. You did not." Black said nothing. The ash fell onto his tweed sleeve. He brushed it away too deliberately. Next, Poirot called Amelia Thorne to the study, the scene of the crime. The room still carried the ghost of bitter champagne and poison. Rain had dried on the window panes, leaving faint streaks like tear tracks. "Your glove was found here," Poirot said, holding up the soft kid glove by one finger. "Not on the terrace where you claim to walk. Inside, near the desk." Amelia stood very straight, silk blouse catching the light. "I must have dropped it earlier in the evening." "Earlier," Poirot echoed. "Yet the housekeeper swears the study was cleaned at 7 o'clock. No glove then. You entered after 8:30, after your husband's last visitor." She drew breath sharply. "I came to speak with him. We argued about money, about his obsession with work. I left, that's all." Poirot tilted his head. "You argue." Voices raised, then silence, and shortly after, he drinks poisoned champagne from a glass you both often shared. Amelia's hand rose to the pearl necklace at her throat, then dropped quickly, as if she realized the gesture betrayed her. "Too perfect, madame," Poirot said softly. "The grieving widow who never lets mascara run. The composed woman who never trembles. Until now." He watched the tiny quiver in her lower lip. The mask was thinning. In the salon, Dr. Lydia Hart waited. She stood near the fireplace, arms folded, in as if bracing for an attack. Poirot produced the torn notebook page. LH knows too much. Must act before Friday. Elias wrote this the day he died. He feared you. Hart's eyes narrowed. He feared exposure. My early work on silicon doping was buried in his patents. I threatened to go public. That's why he was nervous, not because I would kill him. Yet you were the last to leave the study before the private call that never happened, Poirot said. You argued, loudly. Then the line goes dead. Someone cut it. I didn't touch the phone. But you touched the champagne tray. Your fingerprint is on the bottleneck, smudged as if wiped in haste. Hart's composure fractured for a single second, eyes widening, then narrowing again. Poirot made a small gesture. The performance strains, Doctor. Truth does not strain. Marcus Reed came next. I summoned to the small morning room. No gloves today. His hands were raw from twisting them. Your story changes every time, Poirot said gently. First you left at 8:15, then 8:40. Now you admit returning for a file. Which file exactly? Reed swallowed. A patent draft. Elias asked for it. Yet no draft was found on the desk. And your glove, left near the tray, carries a trace of the poison's bitter almond scent. Reed's face drained of color. I wouldn't. You handled the glasses earlier. You knew which one was his. You could have added the poison then. Reed sank into a chair, head in hands. Finally, Oliver Thorne, in the drawing room. The nephew paced before the cold marble fireplace, unable to stay still. The will, Poirot said. You inherit the majority, unless Amelia remarries within 2 years. A strange condition. Elias did not trust you with money. Oliver stopped pacing. He thought I'd wasted. Gambling, debts. But I didn't kill him for it. Your hands were rock steady when the body was found, Poirot observed. No shock, no grief visible. Only later, when money is discussed, do you tremble. Oliver laughed, a short, ugly sound. Maybe I'm just good at hiding things. Too good, Poirot replied. Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth. He stepped to the center of the room, facing the invisible audience of suspects scattered through the house. Rehearsed lines are beginning to falter. Alibis crack. Motives surface. Someone among you wrote the final scene for Elias Thorne, and the script is failing. He touched his magnificent mustache once, thoughtfully. The curtain trembles. Soon it will fall. Rehearsed lines began to falter, and the script was failing. Chapter 5. The mask slips. Evening fell over Silicon Manor like a heavy velvet curtain. The Art Deco chandeliers burned brighter against the gathering dark, throwing geometric patterns of light and shadow across polished marble floors. The drawing room smelled of wood smoke from the newly stoked fire, mingled with the faint sweetness of dying roses and the sharp edge of cigar smoke that still clung to Reginald Black's tweed jacket. Outside, a light rain had begun again, tapping insistently on the tall windows like fingers drumming on a coffin lid. Hercule Poirot had decided the time had come for the spotlight to burn hottest. No more gentle probing. Tonight the masks would either hold or shatter. He gathered them all in the salon. 5 suspects, 5 chairs arranged in a loose semicircle facing the fireplace, and the crackle of logs filled the silences between words. Poirot stood at the center, small and precise, green eyes gleaming under the chandelier's glow. Mesdames et messieurs, he began quietly, the performance has lasted long enough. Tonight we remove the costumes. Tonight we see the true faces. He turned first to Amelia Thorne. She sat very straight in her silk evening gown, the color of champagne, hands folded in her lap. Too still, too composed. Madame, Poirot said, your glove was found near the champagne tray. Your fingerprint, only yours, on the neck of the poisoned bottle. You poured the final glass for your husband. You handed it to him. You watched him drink. Amelia's lips parted. I poured champagne for both of us. It was our ritual. I did not poison it. Poirot produced a small glass vial from his pocket, clear, unmarked, on the kind used in laboratories. He held it up to the firelight. A few drops of colorless liquid shimmered inside. This was found in the greenhouse among your prized roses, the same bitter almond scent as the poison in Elias's glass. Your roses, madame, your greenhouse, your poison. Amelia's hands remained folded, but now the knuckles showed white. Poirot stepped closer. You played the perfect grieving widow. Dry handkerchief, no running mascara, perfectly timed sobs. But grief is messy. Genuine grief disrupts. It does not rehearse. He paused. Let the silence press against her. Then softly, you knew of his affair. Not with Dr. Hart, not with anyone in this room. With a young woman in San Francisco, a secretary at a rival firm. You discovered the letters 3 weeks ago. You confronted him last night. He laughed. He said you were replaceable, and so you replaced him. Amelia's breathing changed, shallow, rapid. The silk of her gown rose and fell too quickly. Poirot continued, voice gentle but relentless. You did not intend murder at first. You wanted only to frighten him. A drop or two in his glass, just enough to make him ill, to make him beg forgiveness. But the dose was wrong. Or perhaps the dose was exactly right. A sound escaped Amelia then, not a sob, but something raw, a small broken gasp. Her hands unclenched. One rose to cover her mouth. Tears, real tears, spilled over, carving black tracks through perfect mascara. I didn't want him dead, she whispered. I wanted him to hurt, like he hurt me. The room seemed to hold its breath. The fire popped once, loudly. Poirot nodded slowly. The mask has fallen, madame, and beneath it, the true face at last. He turned to the others, but his eyes returned to Amelia. Observe, mon ami, this widow's performance has ended. The tears are genuine now. The shoulders shake unevenly. No more perfect rhythm, no more dry handkerchief. Ask yourself, why does betrayal turn love into poison so easily? Consider the psychology. When pride is wounded, when society's perfect wife is discarded, what role remains? Only vengeance dressed as justice. The director method on Amelia Thorne. The performance? Composed denial, elegant posture. Voice steady even under accusation. The tell? But observe. The moment the vial appeared, her hand rose instinctively to her throat, then dropped as if burned. The body admits what the mouth denies. The psychology. I am reminded of the case of the unfortunate Mrs. Inglethorpe at Styles, in where a wife performed devotion while slowly administering poison, rehearsing every tear, every sigh of concern. Yet one small detail betrayed her. She never once touched her husband's hand after he fell ill. Genuine love reaches out. Calculated love withdraws. Here, too, the hand that poured the champagne never once reached to comfort the dying man. The heart knows no script. Therefore, the jealousy was real. The dose was real. The murder was real. You see it now, no? The theater lies in ruins. Poirot made a small gesture toward the rest of the circle. Others among you have masks still in place. Monsieur Black, your calm cigar after the discovery, too calm. Dr. Hart, your fingerprint on the bottle you claim never to have touched. Monsieur Reed, the glove you say you lost days ago. Oliver, in the steady hands of a man who felt no shock. He stepped back, letting the firelight play across their faces. But tonight, the first mask has fallen completely. The performance of the loyal, betrayed wife has ended in tears, real tears. Amelia sat with head bowed, shoulders shaking in uneven human rhythm. No more actress, only a woman. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache once, thoughtfully. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming on the windows like the final applause of a tragedy. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain Night had fully claimed Silicon Manor. The Art Deco chandeliers now burned low, casting soft amber pools across velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The drawing room fire had settled into glowing embers, each sending faint curls of wood smoke into the air to mingle with the fading scent of dying roses and the last traces of Reginald Black's Cuban cigars. Outside, the rain had stopped. Only the drip from the eaves broke the silence, like slow, deliberate applause after a tragedy. Hercule Poirot had moved his center of operations to the small upstairs library, a room rarely used. Shelves lined with leather-bound volumes exhaled the comforting smell of old paper and furniture wax. A single desk lamp illuminated his workspace. Neat stacks of letters, boughten drafts, a torn notebook page, and the small poison vial recovered from the greenhouse. Everything arranged symmetrically. Order and method. He had spent the last 2 hours behind the curtain, literally and figuratively. A narrow service door behind one bookcase led to a forgotten passage that connected the study, the greenhouse, and the guest wing. Dust lay thick on the floorboards, but fresh footprints disturbed it in 2 places. Small, elegant prints, women's shoes, and larger ones, man's brogues. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The backstage, he murmured, is always more revealing than the stage itself. He began with Dr. Lydia Hart. She was summoned to the library. She entered warily, sandalwood cologne preceding her like a warning. Poirot gestured to the chair opposite the desk. "Dr. Hart," he said quietly, "your early collaboration with Elias Thorne was more intimate than mere rivalry. You were engaged to be married, briefly, in 1948, before the first big silicon patent, and before he claimed the doping process as his alone." Hart's posture stiffened. That was 8 years ago, ancient history. Yet you kept the letters. Poirot produced a small bundle tied with faded ribbon, hidden in the false bottom of your suitcase. Love letters at first, then bitter accusations, then silence. You never forgave him? She stared at the ribbon as if it might burn her. He stole my work. He stole my future. But I did not kill him for it. No, Poirot agreed gently. You only wished to destroy him publicly. The patent challenge you were preparing, the press release already drafted, found in your room. You planned to ruin him in the newspapers next week. But someone acted faster. Hart's eyes flickered to the poison vial on the desk. Poirot continued. You were in the passage that night. Your footprint, size 7, a narrow heel, matches the dust disturbance near the study door. You listened. You heard the argument with Amelia. You heard the glass being set down. And you left, without interfering. Hart closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, the mask of cool professionalism had thinned to transparency. I wanted him humiliated, she whispered. Not dead. Poirot nodded, once. Behind the curtain, resentment waited. It did not pull the strings, but it watched. Next came Reginald Black. The partner entered smelling strongly of fresh cigar smoke, as if he had needed courage before facing Poirot. He sat without invitation. The embezzlement, Poirot began without preamble, sliding a ledger page across the desk. Small at first, then larger. You siphoned funds into a private account in San Francisco. Elias discovered it 2 weeks ago when he confronted you. You begged for time. He gave you until the end of the month. Black's jaw worked. It was temporary. Business cash flow. Temporary theft is still theft, Poirot said mildly. And when Elias threatened to expose you, your empire, your reputation would collapse. So you hid the evidence behind the fireplace, but you kept one copy in your room, under the mattress. Why keep it, Monsieur Black, unless you plan to use it later? Black's hands clenched on the arms of the chair. The cigar trembled between his fingers. You were also in the passage, Poirot continued. Your brogues, size 11, distinctive tread. You stood outside the study door after Hart left. You listened to the final argument between husband and wife. Then you retreated. You did not act, but you did not warn. Black exhaled smoke in a long and defeated stream. I hated him by then. But I didn't poison the glass. No, Poirot said. You only waited for someone else to do it. Oliver Thorne was last. The nephew arrived disheveled, eyes red from lack of sleep or tears. Poirot placed a yellowed birth certificate on the desk. You are not Elias's nephew, he said softly. You are his son, born out of wedlock in 1932. Your mother was a laboratory assistant. Elias paid her to keep silent. Raised you as family, close enough to hurt, distant enough to deny. You learned the truth 6 months ago, from a deathbed letter from your mother. Oliver stared at the certificate. His hands shook. He never acknowledged me, he whispered. Even in the will, conditional inheritance, he still controlled me from the grave. Poirot leaned forward slightly. You argued with him that afternoon in the greenhouse, among the roses Amelia tended so carefully. You demanded recognition. He refused. You left angry. But later, after dinner, you returned through the passage. You stood outside the study. You heard Amelia accuse him of infidelity. You heard the glass being poured, and you did nothing. Oliver's voice cracked. I wanted him to suffer. Not this. Poirot regarded him for a long moment. Behind every curtain, he said quietly, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. He rose, small figure casting a surprisingly long shadow in the lamplight. The hidden connections lay exposed. Betrayal of love, theft of work, embezzlement of trust, rejection of blood. Each had motive. Each had opportunity. Each had stood in the dark passage and listened while poison was poured. But only one had acted. The Poirot arranged the documents in a perfect line on the desk. Behind every curtain, a secret, he repeated. Behind every secret, a motive. The embers in the fireplace settled with a soft sigh. The next act would bring the spotlight. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The drawing room of Silicon Manor had become a theater in its purest form. Every chandelier blazed, throwing sharp geometric patterns across velvet curtains and cold marble floors. The fire roared high, sending waves of warmth against the chill that had settled over the assembled cast. The air carried the last traces of wood smoke, dying roses, and the faint, stubborn ghost of Reginald Black's Cuban cigar. 5 people sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs facing the hearth. 5 spotlights of suspicion. 1 empty chair where Elias Thorne should have sat. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, small and immaculate, hands clasped behind his back. His green eyes moved slowly from face to face, missing nothing. Mesdames et messieurs, he began in a voice that carried without rising. You have each performed for Poirot, some with truth, some with desperate artifice. The time has come for the curtain to fall. Let us review the performances, calmly, methodically, without illusion. He turned first to Amelia Thorne. Madame Thorne, you played the grieving widow with technical perfection. Dry handkerchief, steady voice, mascara never running. But the performance was costume, not feeling. You poured the final glass of champagne, your fingerprint alone on the bottleneck. The poison vial hidden among your own roses. You discovered his infidelity. Letters from a young woman in San Francisco. And you confronted him that night. He laughed. You decided he should never laugh again. Amelia sat rigid, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the fire. A single tear escaped, then another. Real tears now. No performance left. Poirot continued without pause. Reginald Black, you performed the loyal partner, the blunt man of business. Yet loyalty does not embezzle funds. You siphoned money for months. Elias discovered the theft. You begged for time. He refused. You waited in the passage outside the study, your footprint in the dust. You listened while poison was poured. You did nothing to stop it, because his death solved your problem. Black's cigar had gone out. He stared at the dead ash in his fingers, as if it belonged to someone else. Dr. Lydia Hart, Poirot said, turning to the tall woman in grey linen. You played the wrong genius, the rival who fought with potence instead of poison. But resentment runs deeper than lawsuits. You were once engaged to Elias. He stole your work and your future. You prepared to destroy him in the press. You too stood in the passage that night, your narrow heel print beside Black's. You listened. You left. You let events take their course. Hart lifted her chin, but her hands trembled once, then stilled. Marcus Reed, the faithful secretary. You performed devotion. Yet devotion does not leave gloves near the poison tray. You handled the glasses earlier. You knew his habits. You carried debts. You saw opportunity when others argued. You too passed through the passage. Your soft-soled shoes left no clear print, but the dust was disturbed. Reed's head dropped into his hands. No denial came. Oliver Thorne, Poirot said last, regarding the young man who had not moved. You played the devoted nephew, the grieving heir. But you are no nephew. You are his son, born in secret, raised at a distance. Elias refused to acknowledge you even in death. The conditional will mocked you. You argued with him in the greenhouse. You returned through the passage. You stood outside the study door. You heard the accusation. You heard the glass being set down. And you waited for someone else to finish what your anger had begun. Oliver looked up, eyes wet, voice hoarse. I didn't pour it, I swear. No, Poirot said quietly. You did not. He stepped forward into the full light of the fire. And so we come to our leading performer. He turned slowly to Reginald Black. Monsieur Black, you gave the most convincing performance of all. Shock at the discovery. Idiot rage at the suggestion of murder. Helpful cooperation from the first moment. You lit a fresh cigar immediately after the body was found, hands perfectly steady, while everyone else trembled. Magnifique. A man in true shock drops things. A man in true grief cannot light a cigar so calmly, but a guilty man, relieved, performs calm better than anyone. Black's face drained of color. Poirot produced a small receipt from his pocket. You purchased the poison, disguised as laboratory cleaner, from a chemical supply house in San Jose 2 weeks ago. Paid in cash, signed with a false name. But the handwriting matches the circled clause in your buyout contract. You planned to kill him yourself, if Amelia did not. When she did, you let her take the blame. You stood in the passage to make sure the deed was done. And then you returned to the drawing room, lighting that cigar with steady hands. Black tried to speak. No sound came. Poirot's voice dropped to a near whisper. The mask slips, monsieur. Did you catch it? The cigar. The one small moment when instinct betrayed rehearsal. A guilty man performs calm. An innocent man feels shock. The body cannot lie forever. He drew himself up, still small, but commanding the entire room. The director method is complete. The performance, helpful, calm, outraged on cue. The tell, the cigar lit without tremor, the hands rock steady amid chaos. The psychology, I recall the ABC murderer. Each crime staged to look random, each alibi perfect, yet the killer betrayed himself through over-control. He smiled too readily when questioned, offered help too eagerly. Genuine horror disrupts rhythm. A calculated innocence keeps perfect time. Here too, the little grey cells saw the pattern. Over-rehearsed calm always cracks under truth's spotlight. Therefore, the poison was yours. The plan was yours. The murder, yours. Poirot made a small final gesture. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth takes her bow. Silence filled the room, deep, absolute. Only the fire crackled on. Reginald Black rose slowly, as if the weight of years had suddenly landed on his shoulders. He looked at no one. He simply walked towards the door, where 2 police officers waited in shadow. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The drawing room of Silicon Manor felt suddenly larger after Reginald Black was led away. The 2 police officers had moved quietly, almost respectfully, guiding him through the double doors without handcuffs. Yet the sound of their footsteps on the parquet floor echoed like the final closing of a heavy theater door. The chandelier lights dimmed slightly as someone turned a switch. The geometric patterns on the walls softened, no longer sharp blades, but gentle reminders of elegance now stained by truth. The fire still burned, but its warmth seemed thinner, less comforting. Wood smoke drifted lazily upward, mingling with the last stubborn traces of Black's Cuban cigar that clung to the leather armchairs. The scent of dying roses had grown cloying. No one had thought to remove the wilting blooms from their crystal vases. A single petal had fallen onto the cold marble hearth and lay there, crimson against white, like a drop of blood left behind after the performance. Amelia Thorne remained seated longest. Her silk evening gown, once a costume of perfect composure, now looked rumpled, human. Her hands lay open in her lap, no longer clenched, no longer performing. Real tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving faint black tracks where mascara had finally surrendered. She stared at the empty space where Black had sat, as if expecting him to re-enter and light another cigar, to pretend the last hour had never happened. Poirot approached her quietly. He did not sit. He stood beside her chair, small and steady. "Madame," he said gently, "the role is finished. There is no more script to follow." She looked up at him. For the first time, her eyes held no mask, only exhaustion and something close to relief. "I thought I could control it," she whispered. "A drop to make him ill. A lesson. Oh, not this." Poirot inclined his head. The intention matters less than the result. Yet the intention reveals the heart. You loved him once. Love twisted by betrayal becomes a dangerous director. Amelia drew a long, uneven breath. Will they hang me? That is not for Poirot to decide, he replied. But justice in California is not swift theater. There will be a trial. Evidence will be presented. Truth will speak, without rehearsal. She nodded slowly, a small, broken gesture. Then she rose, smoothing her gown with automatic hands, the last echo of performance. She walked to the French windows and looked out at the dark garden. Rain had begun again, soft and steady, washing the terrace clean. Dr. Lydia Hart stood near the fireplace. She had not moved since Black's exit. Her pale grey linen suit was still impeccable, but her posture had loosened, shoulders no longer rigid, hands no longer clasped in defense. She sipped from a glass of water someone had placed beside her. The ice clinked once against crystal. I was ready to destroy him in public, she said, almost to herself. Papers, press, everything prepared. But someone else ended the story first. Poirot turned to her. You stood in the passage and listened, Doctor. You could have intervened. You chose silence. Hart met his gaze without flinching. I chose survival. My work, my real work, can finally be recognized now. No more shadow. She set the glass down with deliberate care. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for seeing past the performance. He made a small bow. The truth sees itself, Madame. Poirot merely holds the mirror. Marcus Reed and Oliver Thorne stood together near the grand piano, and the secretary's kid gloves lay discarded on the polished mahogany lid. His hands were bare, red from earlier twisting. Now still. Oliver leaned against the instrument, head bowed, hair falling across his eyes. For the first time, the two young men looked alike, not in features, but in the shared weight of secrets lifted. Reed spoke first, voice low. I knew about the embezzlement. I helped hide some of it. Not for money, for fear. Black threatened my position if I spoke. Oliver lifted his head. And I knew Uncle, my father, would never acknowledge me. I hated him for it. Enough to stand outside that door and do nothing. They looked at each other. No words followed. Only a long, quiet moment in which something unspoken passed between them. Forgiveness, perhaps, or simply recognition that they had both been actors in someone else's tragedy. And Poirot watched from across the room. He touched his magnificent moustache once, thoughtfully. The masks are removed, he said softly, more to the air than to them. The faces beneath are tired, human, flawed. This is what remains when the curtain falls. No applause, only consequences. The police inspector, Harlan, re-entered from the hall. His footsteps were heavy, but not hurried. He carried a small notebook. He closed it before speaking. Black has confessed, he said. The purchase receipt, the poison, the plan to let Amelia take the fall if she acted first. He'll face the court. The rest of you. He looked around the room. Material witnesses, statements tomorrow. No one leaves the county until we say. No one protested. Amelia turned from the window. May I go to my room? Harlan nodded, armed with an officer outside the door. She walked past Poirot, pausing only to meet his eyes for a single second. No words. Only a small, exhausted inclination of the head. Gratitude, regret, acceptance. One by one, the others left the drawing room. Heart first, posture straight, again but lighter. Reed and Oliver together, shoulders almost touching. The room emptied until only Poirot and the inspector remained. Harlan looked at the little Belgian. You saw it all before any of us did. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. I saw the performances, Inspector. The human heart does not rehearse well. It betrays itself in the smallest gestures, the steady hand, the absent tear, the cigar lit too calmly. Harlan gave a tired smile. Next time, call me earlier. There is always a next time, Poirot replied. The crime is the oldest theatre in the world. He walked to the French windows and looked out at the rain-soaked terrace. The night air carried the clean scent of wet earth and roses. Somewhere distant, a clock chimed midnight. Calm, indifferent, final. The inspector left quietly. Poirot remained alone in the drawing room. He arranged 3 cushions on the sofa into perfect alignment. Then he sat, small hands folded, green eyes reflecting the dying fire. No applause followed this performance. Only justice, slow, certain, unglamorous. No applause for this performance. Only justice. Chapter 9. After the show. 3 weeks had passed since the final curtain fell on Silicon Manor. The grand Art Deco house stood quiet now, its chrome railings dull under a thin film of dust, its velvet curtains drawn against the late February sun, and the estate had already been listed for sale. Estate agents in crisp suits walked the empty rooms, measuring windows and noting fixtures, their footsteps echoing where once champagne corks had popped and lies had been rehearsed. Amelia Thorne had left California 2 days after the inquest. She sold most of the contents of the house, furniture, crystal, even the hothouse roses that had once scented her greenhouse poison. With the proceeds, she purchased a small villa outside Lisbon, far from Silicon dreams and California winters. Poirot received a brief, handwritten note on heavy cream paper. Monsieur Poirot, I no longer perform. The mirror shows only me now. Thank you for forcing the curtain down. Amelia. The handwriting was steady. No tremor, no flourish. Genuine at last. Reginald Black awaited trial in San Francisco. His empire had crumbled faster than anyone expected. Patents reassigned, accounts frozen, partners fleeing like rats from a sinking stage. The newspapers called it the Silicon Collapse, a fitting title for a man who had lit his last cigar with such unnatural calm. Black himself had grown thinner, quieter. Visitors reported he spent hours staring at the barred window of his cell, as if still waiting for a cue that would never come. Dr. Lydia Hart had emerged transformed. The patent office reinstated her name on the disputed silicon doping process. The press, hungry for redemption stories, dubbed her the true pioneer of the valley. She had already founded a small independent laboratory in Palo Alto, modest, focused, hers alone. No more shadows, no more stolen credit. When a reporter asked how she felt about Thorne's death, she answered simply, justice arrived late, but it arrived. Marcus Reed had found new employment almost immediately. With a rival firm that valued discretion, his kid gloves were retired. He now wore plain wool ones against the cooler spring air. The debts Black had once used to control him were quietly settled from the estate liquidation. Reed sent Poirot a short telegram. New role, cleaner script. Thank you. Oliver Thorne chose a different path. He enrolled at Stanford to study electrical engineering, his father's field, but on his own terms. The conditional inheritance clause had been voided after Black's confession. Oliver now controlled a modest trust fund. Enough to live simply, enough to begin again. He visited his mother's grave in Oakland once a week, placing fresh lilies, never roses. He wrote Poirot a single letter. I stopped being a son in secret. Now I try to become a man in the open. The theater is closed for me. Oliver Poirot sat in the quiet lounge of the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco, a pot of strong continental coffee steaming before him. The room smelled faintly of furniture wax and fresh linen napkins. Outside the tall windows, cable cars clanged along California Street. Inside, everything was orderly. Sugar cubes aligned, spoon placed precisely parallel to the saucer. He had remained in the city to give his formal statement and to watch the final threads unravel. Now the official business was done. The little grey cells could rest, yet they did not. He opened a small leather notebook and reviewed the cast one last time. Not as suspects now, but as people reshaped by truth. To Amelia, from perfect widow to honest exile. Black, from confident performer to silent prisoner. Hart, from resentful shadow to recognized light. Reed, from fearful accomplice to free employee. Oliver, from denied son to self-made student. Each had worn a mask society handed them. Loyalty, composure, ambition, devotion, grief. Each mask had cracked under pressure. Each face beneath had been forced to look at itself. Poirot closed the notebook. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The theater empties slowly, he murmured to the empty chair opposite. But the lessons remain long after the audience has gone. He rose, small and precise, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The waiter approached with the bill. Poirot paid with exact change, coins arranged neatly on the tray. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm, but not yet summer hot. Poirot walked slowly toward Union Square, green eyes observing the city's new rhythm, cars gleaming with chrome, women in elegant spring dresses, men in sharp suits hurrying to meetings about the next Silicon miracle. He paused at a newsstand. The headline read, "Thorne Murder Solved. Partner Confesses All." Below it, a smaller article. Dr. Lydia Hart announces independent Silicon Research Lab. A new chapter begins. Poirot purchased the paper, folded it precisely, and tucked it under his arm. He did not need to read further. He had directed the play. He had seen the curtain fall. He had watched the actors leave the stage, some broken, some freed, all changed. A street musician played distant piano notes on a portable keyboard. Soft, melancholy, almost like the salon at Silicon Manor on that fatal night. Poirot listened for a moment, then continued walking. The transformations were complete, the masks discarded, the futures uncertain but honest. He reached the corner of Powell and Geary. A cable car rattled past, bell ringing brightly. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The theater had emptied, but the lessons lingered, quietly, persistently, like the scent of roses after the vase has been cleared away. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. The small suite at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco was quiet in the late afternoon of March 1956. Sunlight slanted through half-drawn velvet curtains, turning the room into stripes of gold and shadow. And a low table held a porcelain pot of tisane, chamomile and mint, its steam carrying a gentle herbal scent that mingled with the faint furniture wax of polished mahogany and the clean linen smell of freshly pressed napkins. Hercule Poirot sat in a deep armchair, legs crossed neatly, small hands resting on the arms. Before him lay the morning's newspapers, neatly folded, headlines already fading from sensation to history. Silicon murder solved, partner sentenced to life. Dr. Hart's new lab opens doors to independent innovation. Thorne estate sold. Widow moves to Portugal. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The little grey cells, so active for weeks, now moved slowly, reviewing, cataloguing, reflecting. He had followed the aftermath from this very chair. Reginald Black's trial had been swift and merciless, and the jury needed only 2 hours. The cigar-smoking partner who had lit his last one with such unnatural calm now faced decades behind bars, his empire dismantled, his name synonymous with betrayal. Amelia Thorne had pleaded to manslaughter. Her sentence was lighter, 7 years, with possibility of parole. She wrote Poirot once more from prison. A short card, no perfume, no flourish. I no longer pretend. Even the mirror is kinder now. Dr. Lydia Hart thrived. Her laboratory in Palo Alto employed 12 people already. The first independent silicon transistor prototype bore her name alone. Marcus Reed had risen quietly in a rival firm, discreet, competent, ungloved. Oliver Thorne graduated top of his class last spring. He now worked on circuit design, publishing under his own name, he never mentioning the man who had been both father and obstacle. Poirot sipped his tisane, hot, perfectly balanced, order restored in small things. Why, he wondered, do people perform rather than simply be? Society hands us masks the moment we learn to speak. The mask of politeness, the mask of strength, the mask of success, the mask of grief. We wear them because naked truth is dangerous, too raw, too vulnerable. We fear judgment. We fear loss. We fear being seen as ordinary, flawed human. In the theater of Silicon Manor, every actor had worn such a mask. Amelia performed the perfect wife, while rage boiled beneath. Black performed the loyal partner, while greed counted every dollar. Hart performed the detached rival, while old love festered into hate. Reed performed the faithful secretary, while fear chained him. So Oliver performed the grieving nephew, while a son's rejection burned inside. Each believed the mask would protect them. Each discovered, too late, that masks suffocate. The body rebels, the hand that trembles only when money is mentioned. The cigar lit too steadily amid supposed shock, the dry handkerchief in supposed tears. Guilt always betrays the actor. The little grey cells know this. The pulse quickens, the pupils dilate, the voice catches on a lie it has rehearsed too many times. Truth needs no rehearsal, lies do. Poirot set the cup down with precision. He recalled another case, the Curtin affair, his own final performance before semi-retirement. There too, a man had worn the mask of kindness so perfectly that even Poirot had hesitated. The murderer smiled, helped, consoled, every gesture polished, every word measured. Yet one small thing undid him. He never once looked at the body of his victim with genuine horror. His eyes slid away. A rehearsed man avoids the truth's reflection. An innocent man cannot look away from it. In Silicon Manor, the pattern repeated. Black's eyes had never truly met the dead man's face. He looked at the glass, at the note, at the ceiling, anywhere but the evidence of his own hand. Over control, over rehearsal. The psychology is always the same. The more perfect the performance, the greater the fear beneath. Poirot leaned back, green eyes half closed. Why does truth ultimately triumph over performance? Because performance requires energy, constant vigilance, constant adjustment. The actor tires. He forgets a line. He hesitates on a cue. The body grows weary of lying. The soul rebels. Truth is rest. Truth is gravity, and it pulls everything back to center eventually. In this case, the little grey cells had simply waited, patient, methodical, until exhaustion made the masks slip. One by one, glove by glove, footprint by footprint, cigar by cigar. He smiled faintly. The psychology of revelation is simple. No one can lie forever to everyone, including themselves. Sooner or later, the curtain tears. Sooner or later, the spotlight finds the real face. Poirot rose. He crossed to the window and drew the curtain wider. Below, San Francisco moved in its restless rhythm. Cable cars clanging, people hurrying, the future being built one silicon chip at a time. The city had already forgotten Elias Thorne. Progress never pauses for tragedy, yet the lessons lingered. Authenticity outlasts artifice. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the only path to freedom. Unmasks may dazzle for a season, but truth endures. Poirot arranged the newspapers into a neat stack. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The theater of Silicon Valley had closed its run. The actors had left the stage, some broken, some liberated, all forever altered. He spoke softly to the empty room, as if addressing an invisible audience. Every drama teaches the same wisdom, mes amis. People will always choose performance over truth, until truth chooses them. He lifted his tisane cup in a small private toast. Until the next theater of crime. Poirot will be watching.